What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another video. We made it. It is the final round of the motocross season. So today we're going to get into everything you need to know for round number 11 at Ironman. All right, so first things first, we're going to go right into the injury updates. First guy we're going to talk about is Max Anstey. So we saw Max go down really hard in moto number 1 last weekend. He got tangled up and got flung right off the side of the start straight. Sounds like he was pretty banged up, but he's relatively okay. He was held out of moto number 2 due to concussion protocol. Sounds like he was able to clear that on Monday, so he has been able to get everything back going, and he'll be with us this weekend. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Casey Cochran. We saw him go down in Unadilla, and he was not able to return last weekend, and he will not be with us this weekend. Sounds like he's still trying to recover from some pretty nasty lacerations. Also, we recently have seen Cameron McAdoo get back on the bike, but he will also not be with us this weekend. I find that kind of interesting because if he would have returned for racing last weekend and then also raced this weekend, he likely would have been able to move into the top 20 in the SMX standings and not had to go through the LCQ. And he has been riding during that time. I'm sure he's well out of shape, so I'm sure that's probably why he's not returning, but I did find it interesting nonetheless that he's sitting out. Next, we got to talk about the rider that he would have passed to get into the top 20, and that is Nate Thrasher. So we saw Nate race a few rounds at the beginning of the season, and he did fairly well, but it turns out he was racing with a broken collarbone. It was already plated, and the damage was pretty bad, so he's been sitting out the remainder of the motocross season. Sounds like he was trying to come back for the final round here in Ironman, but he's not going to be able to do that. He will not be with us this weekend. And then our last injury update is the guy just outside of the top 20, and that's Dylan Schwartz. So Schwartz was in the top 20. He was looking like he was going to get in no problem, and then Garrett Marchbanks returned to this series and he knocked him out. So he's been dealing with a wrist infection. He's been trying to battle that, and it's been pretty painful for him. He hasn't been able to finish all of the motos. He has a mathematical chance at making it into the top 20 and passing Nate Thrasher, but realistically it's going to be pretty hard for him. He's going to need a pair of top 5 moto finishes. He's about 33 points out. So kind of a tough pill for him to swallow, but he will definitely be getting some good lane choice in the LCQs if he does not get into the top 20, and he definitely has a good chance at making the main events in SMX. But with that being said, he will be racing this weekend. He's going to give it a shot. Definitely a long shot, but either way, he'll be out there. Moving on to our 450 injury updates. Unfortunately, Justin Barcia is still not going to be able to return. So what went from being a few weeks off turned into the rest of the season. Definitely kind of concerning if you're a Justin Barcia fan. He is really banged up in the knees, so really hate to see that. I'm sure he's going to make a stab at coming back to SMX, but at this point, you have to wonder how healthy he's going to be. Additionally, Derek Drake, he's still out as well. And then, of course, Cooper Webb is also out. We saw him go down at Unadilla, and he re-aggravated his thumb injury, so I'm concerned about him returning to SMX as well. Again, I'm sure he'll take a stab at it, but it sounds like he hurt his thumb pretty bad, so the fact that he's not able to return for any of the motocross rounds is understandable. They probably don't want to risk him getting hurt again or worse, but at the same time, kind of concerning. In some more positive news, Jet Lawrence did return to the bike recently. He's already been riding a turn track early this week, and it sounds like the plan is to get him moving back towards SMX, no problem. So there was definitely some concern that he would not be able to meet that timeline, especially when we saw how long it took Cooper Webb. But keep in mind that Cooper Webb was racing with that thumb injury, which probably made it a little bit harder to recover from than Jet. He is also a few years younger, so I'm sure that helped as well. But either way, he's back on the bike and looking to return to SMX. Moving on to our 250 top contenders. At the top, we obviously have our new champion, Haiden Deegan. So he was able to wrap up the title last weekend. It's going to be interesting to see how he takes on this weekend. He has a whole new set of challenges ahead of him. He already wrapped up the title, so the pressure is basically gone. But there is this other pressure that's kind of on his shoulders to be the best in the class, and he definitely has that alpha top dog type of attitude. So it's going to be interesting to see how he takes that on. Levi Kitchen has won 3 out of the last 4 overalls, and Ken Roczen is dropping down to race in the 250 class as well, so he definitely has some guys that could give him a good race. Even Chance Hymas is coming back around after he got banged up, so it's definitely not going to be a cakewalk for Haiden. If I had to guess, I think we'll see something like what we saw in moto number 2, where if he gets a good start, he'll probably get out and send it, and if he's back in the pack, he probably will do his best but not push the issue. So I feel like there's definitely an opportunity for somebody to come in and get some moto wins and maybe even a new overall winner. but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Haiden go 1-1 and put a stamp on the whole season. Moving on to Levi Kitchen, as I had just said, he's won 3 out of the last 4 overalls, and he's really coming on strong at the end of the season. He probably should have won the Supercross championship, so definitely a nice way to rebound at the end of motocross. So definitely just try to get through here healthy, try to keep the momentum rolling, don't do anything that's going to break your confidence going into this small break. I really wouldn't underestimate Levi though. He was able to win the overall even though he was severely under the weather last weekend. Either way, we're going to have to keep our eye on Levi this weekend. After him, we have Tom Vialle. So this is really Tom's last chance to kind of turn things around and get the ball rolling for him going into SMX. So kind of a weird thing going on with Tom. We expected him to do pretty well in motocross, and he has had a significantly better season this season than he did last season. But when we saw the amount of improvement he made in Supercross, we expected him to probably have something similar in motocross, and it really hasn't happened that way. So since he is now your reigning Supercross champion and we're going into SMX, it's hard not to expect him to be a contender in SMX, but given his motocross results, he just really hasn't been that explosive or really pushed the issue at all. He's definitely rock solid, but he doesn't seem like somebody who's going to come out and contend for the SMX championship right now, and I don't even think he necessarily feels like that. So hopefully he can turn it around this weekend and maybe get some wins. He hasn't even won a race this year other than a couple motos. I feel like out of everybody on the gate, he's probably under the most pressure this weekend. Next, we got to talk about Chance Hymas. So he has had a very up and down season, but it's been more ups than downs. This kid can really take a beating. He's been racing with a torn ACL all season long, and even with that, he's still come out and dominated at times. We saw an insane burst of speed at him in Unadilla. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to hold on to it. We all saw what happened to him, but he is already back and he is looking pretty good. So I'd imagine with another week to kind of rest and heal up, he might be able to come out here and get some moto wins and maybe even another overall. Then of course, we got to talk about Ty Masterpool. So he's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. He went down in both of the beginning of the motos at Unadilla. So he had some good starts there, but he wasn't able to show much from it. He did come through the field very well, but at the end of the day, he wasn't at the top of the results board. He managed to stay off the ground last weekend, but once again, the results weren't too flashy. Even with all that being said, you gotta give it up to Ty Masterpool. He had a really rough start to the season in Paula, not scoring any points in Moto number 1. As long as he scores at least a few points in the motos this weekend, he's gonna end up finishing 5th in the championship, which for a fill-in rider is absolutely incredible. Dropping down to the 250 from the 450 literally the day before the season starts is no joke. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for Ty. I'm definitely a Ty Masterpool fan at this point. I'd really like to see him go and end it on a high note and maybe even go out there and get the overall win. He's definitely one of those guys that could technically do it. But at this point, he does have a contract for next season, so don't expect him to risk anything too much. He definitely is going to want that payday in SMX. So keep your eye on Ty Masterpool. If he gets a good start, I would not count him out of anything. Behind him, we have a few guys who've had a quiet but rock-solid season, like Pierce Brown and Jordan Smith, but I want to talk about Jalek Swoll because he has been quietly going to every single race, putting in the laps, getting those points, and helping that Triumph team build for next season. Things are starting to get pretty spicy over there at Triumph. They've had a really good season overall. Things haven't gone great with Savatgy, and I don't think that's due to a lack of effort. He definitely has had the speed at times. He's been almost the fastest qualifier at a few of the rounds, but he's had a few mechanicals, and overall, he just hasn't had that great of a motocross season, and it sounds like he might not be returning to the team next season. Now, they were supposed to have a 450 program so he could race Supercross next season, and it sounds like that's probably not going to happen. Now, we already saw Joey race half of a Supercross season in 2023 on a basically privateer effort, and he was putting in some really good results, so we know he's capable, and he's probably frustrated having sat out so many Supercross races this season, and then getting to motocross and not really being able to turn any good results there either. So kind of a bummer. It does feel like Joey is one of those guys who could do well on a factory team, but it sounds like at this point it could be kind of a mutual thing where he's probably not interested in staying with the team and they're not super happy with his results. Gonna have to keep an eye on that situation. He does have one more chance to put in some really good results this weekend, but interestingly, they are taking on quite a few new riders next season. It sounds like potentially Max Fullen will be heading over there. We know Jordan Smith is going over there, And we know that Styles Robertson is going to be going over there from Star Yamaha, which kind of makes sense. It's the same type of path that Jalek Swoll took. Both of those guys were on the same Husky team back in the day, and now a lot of that management is over there at Triumph. But the big news this week is that potentially they went after and maybe even got Austin Forkner. Now, as crazy as this sounds, it does kind of line up because we did hear that they went ahead and signed Ty Masterpool, and at that point they were taking on a lot of riders at Pro Circuit, and it does beg the question, where's Austin Forkner fit into all this? Maybe he doesn't. I'm pretty sure that they probably would have kept him, but it sounds like at this point Triumph is offering a substantial salary, and given Austin's injury history, that salary is going to be hard to turn down. I feel like Triumph is probably looking at this whole situation and they're willing to take on Austin's injury risk. Even if he comes out and just races a few rounds and he's able to win them a race before getting hurt potentially, they're going to look at that as a win and that it's worth it, because it is not that easy to go out there and get a Supercross win. All of these other guys that are on the team are definitely capable, but they're not necessarily likely to get Supercross wins like Austin Forkner would be. He has shown time and time again that he's able to return from an injury, and he's able to be fast right out of the gate. Now, this is just speculation at this point, nothing is confirmed, but can you imagine the storyline that would be that if Austin Forkner is able to return to racing and it's for Triumph, and the first ever time he competes a full Supercross season, he ends up winning Triumph their first ever championship? That would be crazy. Probably not going to happen, but man, would that be a story. A couple more 250 guys we got to talk about, and the next one is going to be Garrett Marchbanks. So we saw Garrett have a really good result at Unadilla. He almost got on the podium for the overall. He tied with Jalek Swoll and just missed out. He definitely did not get off to as good of a start last weekend, and his results kind of suffered in the process. But if he can figure out his starts and get up at front, I think he definitely has the pace and the fitness to be a top 5 guy this weekend. And of course, the last guy we got to talk about, probably one of the biggest headlines of the year, at least this weekend, Ken Roczen dropping down to the 250s. He's going to be basically on a borrowed Bar X Suzuki, and he's going to be out there sending it. Probably not going to risk anything too crazy. It's hard to imagine that he's going to be able to get really good starts on that Suzuki, but either way, I am super excited to see what Kenny can do. Like I said, he doesn't have anything to really ride for. It's pretty much a PR stunt at this point, but either way, Ken Roczen is an absolutely capable rider. He's a 2-time Premier Class motocross champion, so he knows what he's doing. He could definitely make things interesting, and honestly, you can't even count him out for the overall win. One last rider, I know I said Ken was the last one, but we cannot forget about RJ Hampshire. We saw him return to racing last weekend, and he's going to be with us once again this weekend. Going to be interesting to see how he does. He seemed like he was able to kind of hold himself back and just ride the motos and not risk anything, so that was refreshing to see. He did look pretty strong. He was moving forward in the motos, so keep an eye on RJ. If he rips a whole shot, he's another guy who could get those moto wins. So there's a lot of depth to the field this weekend. It's going to be an interesting race to see. I definitely wouldn't place any bets if it was me, because who knows what's going to happen. Moving on to our 450 top contenders. At the top, we have Chase Sexton. So Chase is getting close to wrapping up this title, but it is not over yet. He has about a 28-point lead over Hunter, so definitely manageable at this point. He just needs to get second or better in the first moto, and he'll wrap it up in the first moto, so definitely something that will likely happen. But if he does end up DNFing in moto number 1 for any reason and Hunter wins, then all that has to happen is Hunter to win moto number 2 and Chase get third, and Hunter would be your champion. So definitely not time to just coast it in yet. Also, it sounds like Chase will be going to Motocross of Nations to represent Team USA, and it sounds like he's going to be racing MXGP at the very end of the season, probably the Spain round, to try to get himself ready for Motocross of Nations. Then behind him, we obviously have Hunter Lawrence. So Hunter's had an absolutely rock solid rookie season. Really good to see that out of him. Unfortunately, it looks like the championship is just out of reach. Maybe he can get his first overall of the season though and try to end on a high note. But at the end of the day, he really has to go out there and just do his best. He's not out of the championship yet, so he's gonna have to fight to the very last second. Then behind him, we have Aaron Plessinger, who is also trying to establish himself as somebody who should be going to Motocross of Nations, and he is trying to wrap up third in the points. So both things are pretty important. It would be pretty cool to see Aaron go to Motocross of Nations, as he is the definition of an American. It would also be really cool to finally see him get one of those moto wins. So maybe with Chase wrapping up the title, he could have a better shot at that this weekend. If he gets a start, he tends to run up front. So keep your eye on AP. If he can get a good start, he could make things really interesting. Then behind him, we have Justin Cooper, who is another rookie who is having a very solid season. I also think he could be a serious option for the Motocross of Nations team, but it sounds like he's not in the talks. So we saw him be absolutely clutch on that 250 at the 2022 Motocross of Nations when the team won. He was up there towards the front in the final moto, and he, in my opinion, is the reason we won, because if he did not come through like that, we probably wouldn't have had the points we needed. But either way, he's rock solid this season. Looks like he's going to just miss out on finishing top 3 in the points. So kind of a bummer for that. But what the good news is for Justin is it sounds like he was able to secure a ride with Star Yamaha for next season. So that is some good news for him. That was up in the air for the longest. He's been on that team his entire pro career, so it would have been kind of weird to see him go somewhere else. And it sounds like he will not be doing that. So look for Justin to end on a high note. Probably just be somewhere close to the top 5. If I was him, I would be kind of frustrated that I'm riding this good, especially as a rookie, and there's talks of me not even being able to stay on my team. And I rode so well at Motocross of Nations, and now I'm not even being discussed as an option for this season's Motocross of Nations. Next, we got to talk about Jason Anderson. So we've seen him get on the podium a few times this season in motocross. It'll be interesting to see how he transitions to super motocross, especially with some of the guys coming back. It feels like he could be coming down to the end of his career, but he still has at least one more year with Kawasaki. So keep your eye on Jason Anderson. Probably not a lot of spectacular things to see out of him this weekend, but it'll be interesting to see how he handles the transition into super motocross. Next, I want to give a quick shout out to Dylan Ferrandis. So we saw him have that pretty incredible ride at Unadilla. We didn't see much from him last weekend, so that was kind of a bummer. But what I do want to draw your guys' attention to with him is that we don't really know what's going on with him for next season. There's not a lot of talk about where he's headed or what his plans are, but there was talk of him retiring after the end of last season before he got this Honda ride lined up. So could this be the last time we ever see Dylan Ferrandis race professional motocross? I don't know, but I am a little bit concerned. The only thing that I would say is if it is, I just want to know so we can really appreciate it. But either way, not a lot of talk in either direction. But just keep in mind, this could be the last time we ever see Dylan Ferrandis in a pro motocross race. Definitely not what I want to see. He clearly still has something to offer the sport. He's been in the top 10 all season long, which you're kidding yourself if you think that's easy to do. But at the end of the day, he is a champion, and I know he's not going out there to be a top 10 guy. Next, we got to talk about the Husky guys, Malcom and Christian Craig. So we saw a pretty incredible ride out of Malcom last weekend. That was really good to see, and it seems like he's finally heading in the right track. He's getting some momentum going. He's going to a lot of the races. So I'm really curious to see how he can do with a good, healthy offseason, and maybe he can come out and absolutely shred in Supercross. But as for this weekend, I'm curious to see if he can back up what he did last weekend with another solid result. And then as far as Christian Craig, there's some big news with him this week. So there's been a lot of speculation about what's going on with Christian Craig. We knew he wasn't going to stay with Husqvarna, but what we didn't know is where he would end up. It sounds like he's going to end up with Star Yamaha next season. So we'll actually see a 4-rider 450 roster 4-star racing next season. Going to be really interesting to see. Sounds like it's a 2-year deal for him. Now I know this is probably going to upset a lot of people, but it is what it is. It sounds like Christian Craig is going to have a 2-year deal with Star. Personally, I'm all for it. I love to see Christian Craig out there. I feel like he deserves another chance. He's had a rough couple seasons and he never really looked good on that Husqvarna. Now, one interesting little note about this whole situation is that technically the 450 program is a Yamaha factory program that is being managed by Star Racing, where the 250 program is pretty much owned by Star Racing. And it sounds like they're bringing on Christian into this 450 program through Star and not necessarily on a Yamaha contract. So while the lines are kind of blurry between those two things, it sounds like basically it's the equivalent of him being on the 250 side of things while riding a 450. He could potentially have some slightly different equipment throughout the season, so kind of a weird dynamic going on there. But it sounds like one of the reasons he's going over there is because the Deegans want him over there to help them and the rest of the 250 program develop. So if I had to guess what will happen at the end of Christian's contract, I think we'll see something similar to what we saw from Brock Tickle. When his contract ends, Christian will probably become more of a testing rider, and he'll stick alongside the team to help develop everyone. We saw Tickle do that, and he was even working with Jason Anderson as his trainer and coach. So I feel like that will likely be Christian's role, and he will probably help groom Deegan in whatever way he can and be there to help with bike setup along the way. Sticking with the subject of Star Yamaha, we got to talk about their last rider, which is Eli Tomac. So we saw him have a really solid moto in moto number 1 last weekend, and then he had a little bit of a rougher time in moto number 2 with not such a good start. It's going to be interesting to see if he makes any gains from last weekend to this weekend, but more interestingly, we're going to have to keep an eye on him and Aaron Plessinger. It sounds like it's going to probably come down to this weekend. If Eli Tomac can show any signs of being a better rider than Aaron Plessinger, then he could potentially go as the second 450 rider for Motocross of Nations. And it sounds like unless Eli goes, then Haiden Deegan will not be going to Motocross of Nations because Star Yamaha does not want to send only one rider, and it's not worth the investment. So a lot to ride for. It sounds like Eli really wants to go, but it sounds like he is going to have to prove himself. Again, I feel like Justin Cooper should be in this whole conversation, and if they send him, then that would also be 2 Star Yamaha riders. But at the same time, it would be really cool to see Aaron Plessinger go as well. So at the end of the day, I say let the boys fight for it. It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. And then in other interesting news, Eli Tomac did re-sign with Star Yamaha for the entire 2025 season. So he'll be doing Supercross, Motocross, and SMX, which is kind of a bold move because the last couple seasons we see him start out on a Supercross only contract. And this year he went ahead and said, you know what, just put me down for the whole thing. I'm going to be there. He did say that this is likely going to be his last motocross season, as in 2025. So if we do see him return in 2026, it'll likely be a Supercross only season. But either way, we get to look forward to seeing him for the entirety of 2025. And he's also going to be racing the entire World Supercross Championship this year. So going to be seeing a lot of Eli Tomac in the future. Really cool to see that. Also, it's going to be really interesting to see 4 Yamaha 450 rides out there next season. Then one last thing we got to talk about before we move on from our 450 riders is we got to talk about that battle for the bubble in the Super Motocross standings. So right now we have Kyle Chisholm just inside the top 20. He's a few points ahead of Dean Wilson. So right now we have Dean just outside the top 20. He's 14 points back. Gonna be a little bit hard to do that, but we did see Dean get some pretty good results at Paula at the opener. Now it does feel like he kind of brought this on himself by skipping the majority of the motocross rounds. I know he did race some other off-season races, but at the end of the day, Chiz is gonna chiz. He's been racing all season long. It feels like he's earned it at this point, but he's definitely not in the clear yet. If he doesn't score some points this weekend and Dino rides really well, he could lose his spot in the top 20. So keep your eye on that as well. Last thing we're going to talk about is going to be the track weather and schedule. So the weather is looking pretty good. No rain in the forecast. The high is 88, so nothing crazy going on there. The track is the same old Ironman that we all know and love. I love watching the guys send it up and over Godzilla. Ironman always seems to deliver some good racing, so definitely looking forward to that. And as far as the schedule, Ironman is in Indiana, so it is Eastern time. The first moto is going to kick off at 1:15 Eastern, so make sure you tune in for that if you want to catch it live on Peacock. Also, this is your last chance to get into my helmet giveaway if you guys have not already. Stick around for the very end of the video and I will give you all the information for that. We're going to be drawing a winner here shortly, so I will be posting a separate video for that. But that's going to go ahead and do it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. What's up everyone, we're giving away a brand new Fly Formula helmet. I personally use this helmet and I love it. It's super safe, it's got lots of cool features, like the little bendy visor that also breaks away really well. It also has the Rheon technology that is very good at absorbing energy when you crash. It's easy and free to enter. If you're viewing on Instagram, just click the link in the bio. And if you're viewing on YouTube, click the link in the description. Everything is pretty straightforward. and we're going to be running this giveaway all the way till the end of Pro Motocross. After the season finale in Ironman, we'll draw one lucky winner, so enter now before it's too late.